Well, as I don't know, maybe some of you have heard. Everybody here remember George Burns? Maybe some of us who are too young don't remember George. Who knows who George Burns is? You know, George and Gracie and those guys. He had a great little comment about what really makes a good sermon. So he goes, a good sermon is one that has a good beginning and a good ending, and the two of those things as close together as possible. So you may just get a great sermon this morning. On the other hand, one of the things I came to realize that, John sent me his notes. I know what the points he wanted to make in today's sermon. And that kind of dawned on me that, as Ken and I were sharing before the sermon today, that oftentimes when you want to give a message, you know where you want to go, but getting there is kind of all the work. So we may get derailed a couple times on the way to where we're going to go this morning. If so, just slap me around and we'll get back over there. Now, we had Ken read all of the Beatitudes this morning because over this Lenten series that we have, John is going to be preaching on probably 2 or 3 of the Beatitudes as we go through the entire Lenten season in preparation for Easter. And Ken is right. The Beatitudes come from the Latin word beatus, which means blessed. But for me, it's always worked better if I kind of think of them as the beattitudes. This is the way you're supposed to be. This is the attitude you're supposed to have when you're being. So it's the beattitudes, like that's the way you want to be. So as we go over the Beatitudes here, think about them in terms of that. These are the ways that you're supposed to be. And attitude, I think as far as Christianity is concerned, attitude has sort of a lot to do with it. It reminds me of this man that bought that parrot. Do you remember a few years ago in the 70s, it was really popular to have, I guess I'm showing my age, a few years ago. 70s were like 30 years ago. Just recently. Seems that way. But in fact, my boss, I used to work in a sales company locally here, and my boss was a kind of an up-and-coming guy in Newport Beach. So his wife had to give him the perfect Father's Day gift, and he bought him a parrot. She bought him a parrot. And this was the most obnoxious parrot I have ever seen. In fact, if you go down by St. Joe's Hospital, and there's other places in San Francisco and stuff too, where there are literally flocks of parrots. This is not exactly the tropics here. Well, the weather's nice, but we have parrots everywhere, And the reason is because people got these parrots as gifts and just got fed up with them and let them go. And this was one of them. I came to work one Monday morning, and my boss's hand was all bandaged up. And I said, what happened? He goes, this parrot was bugging me so much, I got to reach in there, he took a hunk of flesh out of my boss's hand. And I can see how that could happen because you may have heard about that one man that, similar to my boss, got a parrot, and it was obnoxious. Bad attitude parrot. Totally bad attitude parrot. Full of expletives, bad behavior, couldn't say one nice thing about anything, always cynical. And this guy, he tried yelling at the bird, it didn't work, things just got worse. And finally, in an act of desperation, he takes the parrot and just shoves him in the freezer. And just put him in his, got away from him. And he walked around his house, he thought, probably not a really good idea. I may have hurt the parrot. So finally, he opened up the freezer, and this parrot calmly comes walking out of the man's arm, and he says, I have the quote here. He goes, "I'm sorry I offended you with my language and actions. I ask for your forgiveness. I'll try to improve my behavior." The man was astounded at the parrot's change in attitude, and just when he was about to ask the parrot what caused this change in attitude, the parrot said, "What happened to the chicken inside of that place?" So and that's kind of like how we have to approach our own faith. Now, who has a Bible here today? Okay, open up your Bible to the table of contents and find Joshua. So this is going to take a little exercise here, but I want you to do this. In my Bible, Joshua starts on page 288. So I'm going to turn to page 288. Oh my gosh. I may have a bookmarked. By golly, I do. And then I'm going to turn all the way back to page 1. Genesis 1, chapter 1. So if you don't have a Bible, look for somebody that's near you, or if you do have a Bible, share with somebody that's near you. I wanted to show you this because this is if you've got my right hand is on the first page of Joshua. We're not going to pay any attention to Joshua. What's really important is the last page of Deuteronomy. So you have Genesis 1, chapter 1, all the way through Deuteronomy. That's the first 5 books of the Bible. It's called the Pentateuch because it means 5 books. And these are the books written by Moses, traditionally we understand it, that tell the story of the ancient Jewish people, the Israelites. And for those of us who are in the Sunday after church Bible study, who's in the group that we're all in together? Daily Study Bible? Yeah, we're reading about this right now. It's really fascinating stuff. You don't think so? It is fascinating. At least I think it is. But anyway, what we've learned recently is that every 7 years, the ancient Hebrews would get together and they would read this out loud on one day. They would read all this out loud. Why do you think they would do that? This is their ancient history. This tells them who they are. It's all the various laws that they have to live by. It's all of the rules and regulations as well as their history. Every 7 years they would sit down and they all get together. Some guy would stand up and he'd say, in the beginning, God created the heavens, and he'd start with Genesis 1, chapter 1, and they would read all the way through the very end of Deuteronomy, which is the entire story of who they are. And a lot of it had to do with the kind of theology, the kind of faith that they had. Because before Jesus Christ came into the world, we're descendants of the ancient Jews. Basically, Christianity is descendant of the Jews. And they had a performance-based faith. Everything was based upon what they did. And to take that to an extreme, for example, if the law prohibited work on Sunday because of the Sabbath, you had to be at rest at the Sabbath. If you, for example, had a table with dust on it, and you dragged a salt shaker or a candle or something across the table, well, you were in violation of the law because you were plowing a furrow in the dust. And so you couldn't be righteous if you had broken the law. There's one scene in the New Testament where Jesus and the disciples are walking through the fields and they're hungry. It's on the Sabbath. And they pick little kernels of wheat off of the wheat that's growing there, and they eat it because they're hungry. But they were accused of violating the Sabbath because they were harvesting on the Sabbath day. It got down to those kinds of details, so highly performance-based, and you were judged based upon your behavior, those things that you did. So in many ways, I think Christianity is an attitude-based theology. It's what our attitude is. So we're not to be like parrots, I guess. And Jesus talks about attitudes in the Beatitudes. Even though they're blessings, they talk about attitudes. And I think that to a large extent, that we could take those 14 verses, or 10 verses, whatever they were that Ken read this morning, and we could just reread that over and over and over again, and that tells us really all we have to know about what it means to be a Christian, or what it means what it means that in terms of our relationship with God. So we don't have to read 288 pages all the time to remind us of who we are. All we have to do is read those 14 verses every so often to remind us who we are. But you ought to be involved in Bible study as well, I think. But we're going to take a look at the first 2 Beatitudes today. And John, I'm pretty thrilled about this, actually, because John has the outline like he always has. And I was about to tell you, he always says, follow along on the outline, fill in the blanks, says remember, pay attention to it during the week if you want to. If not, recycle. I was just going to say, it's not going to have anything to do with what I'm going to say today, just go ahead and recycle it. But I looked at it and I thought, there is a couple things on here that we're kind of in common about. So this is a good reminder of what to cover throughout the week. But let's turn our attention to the 2 Beatitudes that we're going to start off with this week. And John is going to go through the rest of these Beatitudes between now and Easter. Frankly, these have always been troubling for me. They've been hard to understand. If we think about the first one, which is, first of all, I was going to say, Ken mentioned the fact that there's some talk about whether or not this is historic or exactly when it was. There's also some controversy